Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And today, we are announcing the initiation of what we're calling the BC vaccine card.
Proof of vaccination, BC's next move to curb the spread of COVID-19 and what it means for you. Also, who is getting the virus? A new breakdown of numbers, unvaccinated versus vaccinated. And
can't starve a cow to death.
BC's drought is causing a hay shortage, how it's affecting local herds.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Well, some big news from the province today. The BC vaccine card is coming starting in just 3 weeks. It means you'll have to show proof that you've gotten the shot. And as Renee Filipponi tells us, it comes as we now have one of the highest per capita rates of infection in the country.
Outside one of Vancouver's mass vaccination clinics is the kind of crowd that's backing the province, happy to see restrictions for the unvaccinated.
I think for the safety for everybody still, that's our main goal, right?
I think everybody just has to get used to the fact that we have to do this, and then everybody will get over it, I guess.
Today's announcement means a BC vaccine card will soon be required for nearly everything deemed non-essential.
This is our way of getting through this next phase of the pandemic that we've been dealt, and to make sure that we can go through the fall with safely reopening schools.
The vaccine card will be needed to attend concerts, restaurants, casinos, theaters, even gyms, and organized events like weddings. There will be no exemptions except for children under 12.
British Columbians need to know that this is the first time anything like this has ever been tried. There may be bumps along the way, but we're very confident.
The hope is this move will convince more people to get vaccinated, but there are concerns the rules are too wide-sweeping.
From my perspective, the most surprising one is that there's no accommodations provided for people who have medical reasons for not being vaccinated.
What recipe are you doing for the bolognese?
But for celebrated Canadian chef David Hawksworth, this is exactly what he's been waiting for and hopes it will bring stability to his industry.
We want to provide a great place for people to work, and we want a safe environment for our customers to come into, and this is putting us on the right path.
He acknowledges the policy will create challenges for staff dealing with people who don't support vaccine passports, but he is okay with that.
If people don't want to get vaxxed, then I really don't want them here. So it's a simple equation.
Okay, Renee joins us live now. So Renee, how exactly is this going to work?
Well, Anita, first up, the government will make these BC vaccine cards available for people to download on their phones. When they go to a non-essential business, they will show that card along with their ID. They're also coming up with a secure alternative for people who don't have cell phones. Then there will be 2 steps to the rollout. The first happening September 13th, where people will need to have 1 dose of the vaccine at least 7 days prior. And then by mid-October, it will need to be both doses. Now, Premier Horgan says this is not meant to last forever. It's just a bridge until the federal government comes up with its own vaccine passport technology and strategy. Anita?
Renee Filipponi reporting live for us tonight in Vancouver. Thanks, Renee. Okay, so why is the province bringing in a vaccine card? Well, it's because the data shows our cases are being fueled by people who are unvaccinated. Dan Burrett is here live with us. Dan, we've been waiting for this data, these numbers. So what have we learned today?
Anita, before today, health officials have said our COVID counts were mostly among those who had not received a vaccine, but they didn't provide hard numbers. Now they are, after some pressing by our Justin McElroy, among others.
Over the past month and up until the end of last week, people who've not been fully vaccinated account for almost 90% of all of our cases and over 93% of the hospitalizations that we've had in this past month.
Henri says we have a rate of 28 per 100,000 COVID cases in people who are unvaccinated. For people who are fully vaccinated, it's 2 per 100,000.
What that tells us is that your risk is 10 times higher if you've not been protected through vaccine. And what we are seeing is that leads to transmission in clusters of groups of people when they come together, particularly now that we are seeing transmission with the highly transmissible Delta variant.
To that end, the past 3 days were bad ones for COVID infections and deaths in our province. The government announced more than 1,700 new infections since Friday, and sadly, 16 more people have died from the disease. That does include updated numbers from August 1st. 133 people are in hospital, 80 in intensive care. And now the province is sharing a more detailed snapshot of infections. It says last week, 71% of cases were among unvaccinated people, and 84% of hospitalizations were people who had not yet gotten one shot. Our Justin McElroy calculates that unvaccinated people were hospitalized for COVID at a rate almost 18 times higher than those fully vaccinated. Back to the vaccine requirements now. The province says the vaccine card rules will apply to post-secondary campuses, including student housing, and that will begin September 7th. Today, UBC said this will also apply to intramural sports and student clubs. And tomorrow morning, the province will update its health and safety measures for K-12 schools and more on post-secondary institutions for the school year, which begin in 2 weeks. Anita.
Coming up, Dan, thank you so much. Meanwhile, a modeling expert says BC's latest plan to curb the fourth wave with this vaccine card is a move in the right direction, even if that means we likely won't see case numbers come down for another month.
I think at that point, the hospitalization numbers will start to fall because of the protection from severe disease that we're finding that the vaccine provides, even with Delta. So keeping people out of hospital, keeping people out of ICU, and keeping people from dying.
An outpouring of grief and heartbreak in the hockey world tonight. More tributes are pouring in for 3 teenage hockey players killed in last weekend's car crash in Surrey. Caleb Reimer, Ronan Sharma, and Parker Magnuson died last Saturday when their vehicle hit a tree. They were junior hockey players between the ages of 16 and 17 from the Delta Academy. People have been putting up hockey sticks, jerseys, and flowers to commemorate their memories. Surrey RCMP says the cause of the crash is not yet known.
When we have such a tragic loss of 3 very young and bright people in the community, it has a deep impact. So we will look to provide more information when we can.
Investigators are still looking into factors like road conditions, speed, and driving experience. Caleb Reimer also played for the Edmonton Oil Kings. As one of the youngest on the team, the team's GM described him as everyone's little brother.
You know, he was a guy with a real bright future ahead of him, and you know, the impact he made on our team off the ice, on the ice last year was tremendous.
Hockey leagues across the continent have also offered their condolences, including the NHL and WHL. An RCMP officer has been charged with assault in connection with a violent police check in January of 2020. Browning was called to a Kelowna apartment to check on the well-being of a nursing student. Surveillance video shows the police officer dragging a woman face first down a carpeted hallway. We caught up with her a short time ago.
Those who are going through crisis are not criminals. They deserve medical care just as someone who's having a heart attack. And I think whether that's social workers or nurses, there should definitely be a healthcare worker on site when they receive these calls.
Wang sued the RCMP and eventually settled her case. Brown's first appearance is scheduled for September 14th in Kelowna Provincial Court. The man known as the Abbotsford killer, Terry Driver, is dead. Correctional Services Canada says he died of apparent natural causes while serving a life sentence. Driver attacked, raped, and killed 16-year-old Tanya Smith in October of 1995. He also clubbed the teen's friend, Misty Cockrell, with a baseball bat as she tried to stop the sexual assault. Driver then terrorized the Fraser Valley community with taunting phone calls to police and a local radio station, vowing to kill again. He was caught in May of 1996 and denied parole several times after that. Well, protests were held this afternoon at a dozen RCMP attachments across BC in support of ongoing logging blockades on Vancouver Island. The crowds chanted in opposition of what activists at Fairy Creek are calling excessive and unnecessary use of force by police. Isabel Regem has more from one of the rallies in Burnaby.
A crowd gathers at this RCMP detachment protesting police action thousands of miles away at Fairy Creek near Port Renfrew.
We're still here.
Mike Doga has been arrested at the old-growth logging blockades in the past. He returned to the Lower Mainland yesterday from Fairy Creek.
We're doing it in a compassionate way, and yet more and more people's lives are in danger as the tactics of the RCMP escalate.
He says what he saw was difficult to watch.
And it's traumatizing.
Videos posted to social media this weekend show officers using pepper spray on a group of people with linked arms. The video, in part, is what prompted rallies here in Burnaby and in Victoria, along with another dozen cities across BC.
The RCMP are basically doing whatever it takes to remove citizens who want to protect the 1,000-year-old trees in the name of extraction, logging extraction.
The RCMP says the video doesn't tell the whole story.
There was a member that was shoved over, knocked to the ground, actually knocked unconscious, and then they had to be airlifted out of the vicinity. So OC spray was used in order to disperse the crowd and get them to comply to the directions that they warranted.
The NDP MP for Victoria wants the incident to be reviewed, writing a letter to Canada's Public Safety Minister Bill Blair for an independent inquiry into RCMP enforcement. BC's Premier was asked about the ongoing tensions today.
At this point, they're continuing to stay in the territory against the wishes of the Pachidat, against the injunction that was brought forward by the courts. And law enforcement doesn't take direction from government. They make their choices based on how the courts direct them, and they've been directed to enforce the injunction.
Doga says far more needs to be done to protect old-growth trees in BC before the blockades come down. A battle, he says, is worth the fight. Isabel Regam, CBC News, Burnaby.
The vandalism over the weekend of the Komagata Maru Memorial in Vancouver is now being investigated as a possible hate crime. Pictures and reports of the graffiti began pouring in yesterday. The memorial acknowledges the plight of the people on the Komagata Maru ship. It was put up nearly 10 years ago in the Cole Harbour neighborhood of downtown Vancouver. The graffiti has covered the names of those aboard the ship. Vancouver police are collecting evidence.
The memorial is very important to this community, and it holds a lot of significance to people in Vancouver, and in particular to people in the Sikh community. It's very concerning to us when an incident like this happens, and we do make it an investigative priority.
In 1914, nearly 400 people from India were denied entry to Canada despite being citizens of the British Empire. Anyone with information on the vandalism is asked to contact police. Well, cooler temperatures have helped crews make progress on some of the most severe fires burning across the province in the last 48 hours. Conditions, though, are still very dry near Kelowna, and firefighters continue to battle the White Rock Lake fire, where an evacuation order is in place for more than 1,300 properties. Several other evacuation orders in the province, however, were downgraded over the weekend, and fire officials hope that will continue throughout the week. 246 wildfires are still burning across BC. Amy Bell joins us live now with the forecast. Johanna is off tonight. Amy, good news on the fire front, hopefully?
Yeah, yes, as you mentioned, we've had those cooler temperatures, we had some rain. So taking a look at the fire danger rating, we can see much of the province now has sunk down into the low and even very low areas. One area of concern, though, still over across on Vancouver Island, where we have incredibly dry conditions, and yes, still very dry around Kelowna, and special air quality statements for the entire Okanagan Valley. So things certainly have not been resolved, but they did get a little bit of respite for all those hardworking firefighters. Unfortunately, we are heading into a couple more days of warm and dry weather, so we will have to keep an eye on things. But I think everything was much needed over the weekend, and we got lots of cooler temperatures right across the province. We did see a fairly dry day. We had a little bit of unsettled activity earlier around Prince George and in the Kamloops area, but for the most part, things have really settled down. We've got this ridge of high pressure that's going to be building in, so that means we're going to be heading into a couple of days of sunshine and temperatures in the low to mid 20s. So we're actually right where we should be for this time of year. year. Thursday, we'll take a little bit of a dive back into the clouds and the cooler temperatures. But yeah, you can see for tomorrow, we're looking at a high of about 22, slightly warmer on Wednesday, and then a big change on Thursday as we see showers, just a high of 16 and dropping to about 14 degrees overnight. So certainly seeing things a little bit more comfortable in the evening hours, but still plenty of summer-like weather heading our way.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon again, Amy. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, BC's drought has led to a shortage of hay. There isn't enough feed in the province to keep cattle nourished, and as Joel Ballard reports, it's forcing ranchers to make very hard decisions as they also cope with wildfires.
Much of southern BC is in the grips of a drought. It's only rained a handful of times in months.
Because of that hot weather, a lot of the grass stunted, and we're just seeing way less come off the fields than we've ever seen.
Johnson's company buys and sells hay. He says demand is high, not only in BC, but across the prairies and some U.S. states that are also enduring a drought.
We're getting phone calls from, Idaho, from Montana, like places that normally put up a lot of hay for their own animals.
There simply isn't enough hay to go around, and what is available comes at a higher price. Normally, if one region has a bad year, hay can be moved from another province or state, but the drought is widespread.
Because it's so far-reaching this year, it's not going to happen, and there's not really a way to reverse it. Ultimately, there's going to be a lot less animals.
A sad reality many ranchers are preparing for.
Can't starve a cow to death. If we can't look after them, they have to become part of the food chain.
He predicts Canada will lose about 1/3 of its base beef cattle herd.
So if we have to do this with our younger cattle that are highly productive, we're going to upset the chain, not only for this year, but it's going to take us years to rebuild that.
And it comes at a time when wildfires are threatening both the cattle and what hay remains. Boone says many cows are getting killed by smoke and flames, while those left injured will have to be euthanized.
With the fires, we're downsizing not of choice, but through a disaster.
Dairy farms are facing different pressures because most dairy farmers grow their own hay, like this farm in Langley. They harvested just enough from their first cut to last the year, but climate change is top of mind.
We've been seeing this for the last 5 to 10 years in our local Fraser Valley, so farmers are certainly looking to the future and wanting to make sure that we have products for the cows to eat.
He says they're now looking at planting different crops that can survive a drier climate, but the damage is already done on this season, even if more rain falls. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Langley.
Well, Vancouver's Punjabi Market is getting a boost with the help of colorful murals. The murals in the market public art display is the first of its kind in the neighborhood's 51-year history. 5 artists worked on their murals along Main Street between 49th Avenue and 51st Avenue. It's part of an effort to revitalize the market, which is facing gentrification and displacement because of increasing rent costs.
The intention behind this was, again, to just bring more life back to the place, to bring the magic back to this place, and we hope we've achieved some of that, and over the next few years we hope that we are able to achieve more of that.
Organizers and artists alike hope the artwork draws more people to visit the neighborhood and the businesses that operate there. Well, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC News at 6 o'clock. I'm your host, Anita Bathe. And if you're not already doing it, you can always watch our program live on our free app, CBC Gem. You can also catch us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. The rush to evacuate people from Afghanistan continues. Why the UK is calling for troops to stay on past the end of the month. That's coming up. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Canadian artists are making a big splash on the mosaic scene in France with an exhibition dedicated entirely to them. As Enrique Wilhelm reports, one of the artists featured is excited to showcase his talent.
This is where it's being pieced together, the mosaics of St. John's artist Terry Nichols. And this is where it currently is, an exhibition in the French city of mosaics, Paray-le-Monial.
This began in 2018 when Ontario mosaicist Sophie Drouin made a presentation to the International Association of Contemporary Mosaicists. And they were struck by Canadian art. They had never seen anything quite like it. I got an email one day saying, "Would you like to participate?" Oh yes.
The exhibition takes place from July 10th to September 19th and showcases the mosaic art of 12 Canadians.
This is the first time that a country from North America has been invited to exhibit in Europe. We were quite excited. All 12 of us artists who were invited by the French to participate. It's also, from what I know, the largest exhibit of North American mosaics ever held in Europe. And apparently our artwork is being received very well. We're really new to the mosaic scene, seeing that mosaics go back to 3000 BCE, and in Europe they go back to the Romans and the Greeks. So Canadians are new. And it was, wow, we're being recognized. That's a very nice feeling.
Nichols is the only artist from the Atlantic provinces who was invited to be part of From Canada. Representing the province makes him feel a certain kind of way.
Wonderful. They are not aware of how this particular part of the world is. And so I chose the theme of ice and how ice affects the environment, how it affects us.
The pandemic stopped Nichols from going to the opening ceremony, but in March of next year, the exhibition will make another appearance in Quebec City. That time around, Nichols is hoping to be there. Henri, CBC News, St. John's.
When I saw pictures of
Asylum in Canada are pleading with the Canadian government to help their families stranded in Afghanistan.
Our families are in danger. Taliban are in the media, they are showing off that we are good people, we are a good version of Taliban this decade, but each night they are going behind our families and they are looking for our family members and they are killing them.
Afghans in BC took to the legislature earlier today, asking the government to especially help the loved ones they left behind in Afghanistan. They worry their families will be targeted if the Taliban discovered their identities. Asylum seekers are asking the government to extend the safety and security they were given to include their stranded families. And over in Afghanistan, officials say Canadian Special Forces have helped more than 400 people get on evacuation flights. This includes Canadian citizens and Afghans accepted for resettlement here and in other countries. The troops are operating outside the confines of the Kabul airport as the security perimeter there becomes increasingly dangerous. Canada will also take part in an emergency G7 meeting tomorrow on the Afghan airlift, which will include the U.S., whose deadline for evacuations is August 31st.
We are well aware of the stated desire by the Taliban to have this mission completed by the 31st of August. I would tell you that we too are still planning on completing it by the 31st of August. That is the mission that had been signed by the Commander-in-Chief, assigned to us, and that's what we're trying to execute at.
The Pentagon says in the last 24 hours, dozens of flights have left Kabul. U.S. and allied aircraft carried about 16,000 Afghans out of the Taliban-controlled country, but the deadly violence that has blocked many from entering Kabul airport is ongoing. And that's why the British Prime Minister wants U.S. President Joe Biden to keep doing evacuations in Afghanistan beyond August 31st. Boris Johnson plans to request it tomorrow at the G7 emergency meeting. As Tessa Arcilia reports, Britain's Minister of Defense says every extra minute counts.
Evacuation efforts continue on the ground. Tens of thousands of Afghans still trying to get out of the country. The situation in and around Kabul airport remains volatile and chaotic. Around 20 people have reportedly died due to shooting and stampedes in the last week alone. A firefight reportedly erupted this morning between an unknown gunman and Afghan security forces, where one Afghan security died. It also involved some U.S. and German soldiers, it's been reported. Now, amid all that, the 31st of August is looming, the day U.S. and international troops are meant to be leaving the country completely. But some governments, like the UK, think that they need more time. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is set to ask U.S. President Joe Biden at tomorrow's virtual emergency summit of the G7 to extend the troop withdrawal date to allow for more evacuation flights. Now, the UK Defense Minister explains why it's necessary to get the US on board for any decisions on troops.
I don't think there is any likelihood on staying on after the United States. If their timetable extends even by a day or two, then that will give us a day or two more to evacuate people, because we are really down to hours now, not weeks, and we have to make sure we exploit every minute to get people out.
The U.S. is under pressure to agree to extend. France also said they needed more time to evacuate. But the Taliban said that they will not agree to extending the deadline for Western forces to leave, and that is a red line. Now, in that emergency meeting tomorrow, the UK is also expected to raise the prospect of putting new sanctions against the Taliban, to consider economic sanctions and withhold aid if the Taliban commits human rights abuses and allows its territory to be used as a haven for militants. They're also set to discuss a long-term strategy for Afghanistan, especially now that Russia and China are trying to gain more influence in the region. So are India and Pakistan jockeying for control. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
The situation in Afghanistan is also concerning because of what may be allowed to grow under Taliban rule. Thomas Dagla looks into how these fears could give rise to the kind of terror that changed global security 20 years ago.
It may now look like peace in these streets away from the airport in Kabul, but there's danger hiding in plain sight. Consider who was at this high-level meeting just days ago. Former Afghan President Hamid Karzai on the left, negotiating directly with the chief of the brutal Taliban offshoot, the Haqqani network. Their leadership, a longtime target of the FBI after deadly attacks. This truck bombing 4 years ago near the German embassy in Kabul killed more than 150 people. And the Haqqanis are just one of the militant groups now emboldened by the Taliban's takeover.
The number one concern is their strategic relationship with al-Qaeda.
Remember, the Taliban gave safe haven to Osama bin Laden to plan the 9/11 attacks, and Afghanistan hosted camps where al-Qaeda would train children to fight, highlighting the long-time ties between the militant group and the Taliban. This former CSIS intelligence analyst warns about that enduring relationship.
Whether or not the Taliban is in a position to dictate terms to al-Qaeda in the long term, I think remains to be seen, and be ready for the possibility that al-Qaeda will try to launch attacks from Afghanistan.
When the Trump administration struck a deal with the Taliban for U.S. troops to pull out, a key condition was this: the Taliban will prevent any group in Afghanistan from threatening the security of the United States and its allies, and will prevent them from recruiting, training, and fundraising. A promise that's left Western leaders unconvinced.
Those now taking power have the responsibility to ensure that international terrorists do not regain a foothold.
For Afghans, though, there's a more imminent threat, with videos circulating purporting to show Taliban militants carrying out punishment in the streets and door-to-door raids. Nasreen Nava got out just before the Taliban arrived.
It's a huge difference, like right now, if you compare just 2 weeks. And we see that women were beaten just because of their clothes.
It's a nightmare for Afghanistan and a potential threat for the globe. The men with the guns are in charge now, but can't control what happens next. Thomas Dagle, CBC News, Toronto.
As the campaign for the September 20th election heads into its second full week, the Liberals are promising big dollars for health care. Today in Halifax, party leader Justin Trudeau committed billions for the provinces and territories. But as David Thurton reports, his message may have been downgraded by a Twitter storm.
In reality, we are leading the G7.
Campaigning with Anita Bathe, dubbed the Minister of Vaccines, Justin Trudeau made his healthcare pitch to voters.
That the federal government needs to step up with more funding.
Money Liberals say to reduce wait times, to hire 7,500 new family doctors and nurses, just over $10 billion, on top of the funding already promised in this year's budget.
This is our moment to rebuild a healthcare system that works for all Canadians.
Trudeau made the announcement in Nova Scotia, a province fresh off its own election, which saw health issues take center stage. Nova Scotia voters handed progressive Conservatives a majority and gave the provincial Liberal government the boot. If today's announcement was about Trudeau trying to avoid a similar fate, his message may have gotten lost in the controversy on Twitter over a candidate's attack post. The social media platform marks this video manipulated media.
Would you be prepared to allow provinces to experiment with real healthcare reform, including the provision of private, for-profit, and non-profit healthcare options inside of universal coverage?
Yes. With their social media yesterday, they're importing American-style misleading politics. Let me be perfectly clear. I 100% support our public and universal healthcare system.
The Liberals say that they're standing by their tweet and are challenging the social media platform's decision. The party says O'Toole's comments are posted in full, which voters can go watch to see the Conservative leader's unedited comments. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
The rest of the party leaders made their case to voters today.
Our commitment is we will end fossil fuel subsidies, unlike Justin Trudeau, who promised to do so but has increased them. And we want to make direct investments to workers to support them. We want to create good jobs. We want to invest in renewable energy, and we want to clean up our environment.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is focusing on the environment in Montreal, campaigning in Justin Trudeau's home riding. Singh says the NDP would even cut programs that subsidize the cleanup of orphan oil wells and funding that helps resource companies transition to a low-carbon economy.
It's important to recognize that Parliament, as it stands at this moment, is not a welcoming place for many people.
Green Party leader Anna Paul returned to a common theme she's championed since she became leader, the culture of federal politics. Paul is calling for greater diversity in the House of Commons. She also wants more cooperation and an end to hyper-partisanship and intense political self-interest. The Pfizer vaccine has been fully approved by the U.S. FDA. So what changes and what does it mean for the efforts to get shots in the arms of more Americans? That's coming up.
Water from glaciers in the Canadian Northwest is some of the most pristine on the planet. Some of it is already being scooped up at river mouths on British Columbia's coast and bottled for export to the U.S. And some companies have even bigger plans. They want to export to the U.S. whole shiploads of Canadian water. But their first potential deal on that scale fizzled today. Ian Henri has the story.
It is as pure and clean as it looks. Every day, millions of liters of water tumble from this glacial stream into the ocean. And when Fred Paley looks at this, he thinks money, big money.
I think that we could be equal to the mining industry in the future. It's a great renewable resource. It's raining every year, snowing each year, and the water is just flowing into the ocean at the present time.
Snowcap and a handful of other BC companies are already selling bottled water to the U.S., where total sales are more than $2 billion a year and climbing. And then there is the prospect of bulk sales. Drought in Southern California has forced cities such as Santa Barbara to go on a desperate search for water. And some municipalities are considering importing supertankers full of water from British Columbia.
We can't wait any longer. We can't count on there being rain next winter or the winter after that.
Late this afternoon, BC water exporters learned they had lost their first big opportunity for a bulk contract. City of Santa Barbara has decided to build a plant to extract salt from ocean water. Some critics of water exports, including a coastal Indian band, say the Santa Barbara decision is a good opportunity to step back for a moment and study the environmental effect of taking billions of liters of water out of a river.
There has been no extensive environmental or other study of this sort of a proposal that the band believes would satisfy its concerns.
But Snowcap and its competitors say they have the appropriate government permits, and they'll continue to promote the sales of BC water in the United States and abroad. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Events aimed at improving relations between the two superpowers usually take place in international cities like Geneva, Washington, or Moscow. But now you can add the town of Abbotsford, British Columbia to that list. It made history today at its International Air Show. The air show's held every year, but this year there was something new. The Soviet Union sent some MiG-29 fighters. It's the first time this type of MiG has ever been on display in North America. Even American pilots got a close-up look. This one got to climb inside.
It's good to have an encounter like this with the Soviet people. It's been fun.
Where else would you have ever seen a Soviet MiG?
Well, that's just it. The other places we may see them is not something we really wanted to see. So
combat?
That's right.
And there was another first. The head of the Soviet Air Force paid an unannounced visit. He's the highest-ranking Soviet military official to visit any air show anywhere in the world.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The man known as the Abbotsford Killer, Terry Driver, has died of natural causes while serving a life sentence. Driver attacked, raped, and killed 16-year-old Tanya Smith in October of 1995. He clubbed her friend Misty Cockrell with a baseball bat as well. She survived. Driver then terrorized the Fraser Valley community with taunting phone calls to police and a local radio station, vowing to kill again. He was caught in '96 and denied parole several times after that.
This is our way of getting through this next phase of the pandemic that we've been dealt, and to make sure that we can go through the fall with safely reopening schools.
BC will soon be requiring proof of vaccination if you want to attend a concert, sporting event, movie, restaurant, nightclub, or fitness class. The new BC vaccine cards will be implemented on September 13th, requiring at least one dose. And by October 24th, 2 doses will be required. We're also learning in BC, unvaccinated people account for about 90% of COVID-19 cases right now and 93% of hospitalizations. The U.S. has its first fully approved vaccine against COVID-19. Until today, the Pfizer-BioNTech shot had emergency authorization only. As Megan Fitzpatrick reports, health experts and the U.S. president hope the news will help convince those still sitting on the fence that it's safe to get vaccinated.
The moment you've been waiting for is here. It's time for you to go get your vaccination and get it today.
That was President Joe Biden's message to Americans who say they wanted full approval of a COVID vaccine before rolling up their sleeves. The Food and Drug Administration gave that green light today, shifting the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine from emergency use authorization to a fully approved license. At 3 months, it was a faster than usual approval process, but the FDA said its review was thorough.
But we want to underscore that our efforts to move as quickly as possible have in no way sacrificed scientific standards or the integrity of our process.
The review included studying updated clinical trials and real-world data and conducting inspections of the manufacturing facilities. The FDA says the vaccine is clearly effective at preventing serious illness and death. A warning about an increased risk of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, is included with the vaccine's prescription information. Any side effects of COVID vaccines are worth the benefits they provide, says this doctor, especially as the contagious Delta variant continues to strike.
Yes, there are some side effects from the vaccines that we're concerned about. There could be some issues with getting the vaccine, but you know, the biggest issue that we see is when you get COVID and you are so sick that you die, that it makes it worthwhile to get the vaccine.
Public health experts and the president hope the FDA approval boosts confidence in the vaccines. About 52% of the eligible U.S. population is fully vaccinated. In some states, the rates lag behind that figure and new COVID cases are climbing nationwide. Biden says there's no time to waste.
The pandemic of the unvaccinated is a tragedy that is preventable. People are dying and will die who don't have to. So please, if you haven't gotten your vaccination, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, do it now. It could save your life and the lives of those you love.
Biden also urged employers to impose vaccine requirements, saying it only makes sense as this country continues to battle the pandemic. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Washington.
Players with the BC Lions are being closely monitored after 9 Edmonton Elks players tested positive for COVID-19. The Elks' Thursday game against the Toronto Argonauts has now been postponed. The league says players and staff will have to go through testing and isolation. The team's last game was Thursday against the BC Lions. In Quebec, most children will return to classes next week, but today the school year began for some post-secondary students. Alison Northcott shows us what their first day looked like without strict measures.
For the first time in nearly 18 months, this college is fully reopened and the campus is coming back to life.
I'm not used to it anymore. Seeing so many people, and I was like, hey, I know all these people. I get to meet people so easily.
Now we're gonna have more of a normal college experience that being online, on Zoom, didn't really allow for.
Everybody will have to wear a procedural mask.
Inside, hand washing and masks are mandatory, but distancing in classrooms, some with as many as 40 students, is not. And while vaccination is encouraged, it's not required for students or staff.
There is a concern since the end of the spring and all through the summer. We have been promoting the importance of young people in that demographic, 18 to 30, to get vaccinated.
Part of that push includes this pop-up vaccine clinic on campus.
That we're talking about an age demographics that is actually the least vaccinated.
Dr. Donald Vinn says that, plus the Delta variant, create a big risk that needs to be mitigated.
We should really have maximal safety measures to protect all of our students while they're in school so that they can focus on their education and on their social activities rather than being anxious about whether the neighbor in the class is actually infecting them.
First-year student Omar Alam is happy to be on campus in person, but he's not convinced it will last.
With all these people, I think it's going to spread very easily, especially with the new variant. I'm expecting to be online soon, but I'm enjoying it while I can.
Some elementary and high schools reopen later this week. So far, the province has said masks in class and class bubbles will no longer be required, but the health minister says that could change. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Parents of children with complex needs are being sent out of the province after the lead cardiac surgeon at BC Children's Hospital went on leave. Why the backstory leads straight to the courts coming up. At 6:42, you are looking at a live shot at the St. Eugene Resort in Cranbrook, BC. Clear skies in the Kootenays as the Smoky skies clear. Amy has a look ahead at what's coming up this week.
Squish that down. There we go. Get it off quick. Hook the other end to your nozzle.
We are putting on our first all-female EFF course in the NWT. Try to garnish some interest and see where it takes us. Hope it brings us some more women in the field because I think we could use it.
Okay, come on. We're just going to put the nozzle right back on this. Holy shit, you're good, you're good. Somebody get behind her. She needs somebody with that pressure. Hold on to it.
hopefully it brings them wanting to do it as well. We just want to like pique some interest and like get them a little bit less nervous about trying out, because I think that's one of the issues is just like it's so male dominated and it's intimidating to just try and be like a female crew member. Like you don't even know where to start sometimes. And so like we just want to like reach out to any of the females in the Northwest Territories and just say like you are so welcome to be a part of this, and it's like we want you here and like we want more females in this job for sure.
Because it's just not like pound for pound strength. There's so much like tactical stuff and other kind of leadership roles that women would be great at. And we bring a lot to the table too, so it's not to compete with men, it's to fill the gaps and make like a more balanced and complete crew.
So I'll tie this onto the hose or to the tree and then walk.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, you got this.
All right. So women are mothering by nature. So, and we're dealing with Mother Nature. So I think, you know, we would be really good at it. You know, like I think it's super important that the women out there shouldn't be intimidated at all, and just come and, you know, change the male-dominant industry into working with Mother Nature.
This is my first, and trying to get some experience from it. So in the long run, I can, you know, one day I can be a forest fighter.
Yes, grab that nozzle now. Release it slowly. Water coming!
They taught us how to switch the hose into another hose while they clamp the other one. We got to jump into the other side and clamp those together and get another hose and get a clamp on the other one. So it was a tough thing, but it's kind of, the holes are strong. It's once they put the water pump back on, I was like, whoa, I had somebody, I was like, somebody hold me back. So they had to hold me back, and yeah, we did it though, I did it. It feels good, actually, to complete all that was really kind of awesome. I felt bitter afterwards. So yeah, it's a good thing that I went for this program.
There you go!
It's just important for us to have some role models, and I think that's why it's important that we're running this course, just so that women see other women doing it. Because it's not so much that there's not room in the industry, but I think there needs to be a shift in perspective. I think women take themselves out of the game and think like, hey, maybe I'm not strong enough, maybe I'm not big enough, maybe I'm not good enough. But we are enough. And
Tropical storm Henri is threatening more downpours, flooding, and even tornadoes in the U.S. Northeast. It made landfall yesterday in Rhode Island and has battered a big swath of the U.S. East Coast with heavy rain and strong winds. Power outages have affected more than 100,000 customers in 4 states. Henri is headed for Nova Scotia tomorrow. All right, Johanna is off this week. Amy Bell joins us now with the forecast. But first, Amy, what are Nova Scotians expecting to see when Henri hits tomorrow?
Yeah, thankfully it will be losing a little bit of its strength, but what they're really going to see is just incredible amounts of rain and, of course, those very high winds. So certainly if ever batten down the hatches was time to say, it would be now. But yes, they're going to be in for a very stormy 24 hours or so. Thankfully, that's far enough away from us that we're not going to be seeing anything nearly as dramatic. In fact, heading into a very quiet, boring stretch of weather for the next couple of days. We did have cooler and wetter weather over the weekend for much of the province, so that has been great news for the wildfire situation. It is still very dry and hot, though, around the Okanagan, and we have very poor air quality for the entire Okanagan Valley, so something to be aware of over the next several days. Taking a look, though, for the next couple of days, you can see very dry across the province, and then we see this system moving in, bringing some rainfall to just the northern tip of Vancouver Island. for the north and central coast, and then starting to see some spotty showers popping up in the northern half of the province, but staying dry really until at least midweek. And we will see those temperatures just at a mid-20 at the highest range, and then low 20s at the bottom. And that's right where we typically would be for this time of year. So a lot of people saying it feels like summer's coming to an end and that there's this fall-like feel to the weather. It is still very summer-like. We just had such hot weather earlier in the season that I think we've kind of become used to that. So fear not, there's still plenty of warm weather out there. We will see that sunshine right across the board tomorrow on Vancouver Island. Port Hardy, one exception. You will be dealing with some showers, but in Whistler, just a few clouds and a high of 22. And moving out to the Fraser Valley, you will see those temperatures marginally warmer into the mid-20s, and of course always cooler down near the water. Prince Rupert, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow, increasing cloud for Dease Lake, and then yes, high of 17 and some showers for Port Hardy. That's the outlier though. We're really looking at a lot of sunshine right through the interior. And for the Okanagan, seeing those temperatures in the mid-20s. Sorry, almost fell off my box there. What we are going to see over the next 5 days is some warmer weather. We'll hit pause at the midpoint of the week, and then we'll see those temperatures ramping back up. So for tomorrow, a high of 22, dropping down to 12 overnight. So we're certainly seeing things much more cool and comfortable in the overnight hours. 23 for a high on Wednesday, and just 16 with lots of showers on Thursday. But we dry up and warm up again for Friday, and as we head into the weekend, we're looking at plenty of sunshine as well.
Yeah, I just said before the show started, it feels like fall.
It does, but really, it's still summer.
Try to remember that. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Some local families of children in need of specialized cardiac care are devastated after they say their heart surgeries at BC Children's Hospital were canceled. And as Janella Hamilton reports, many of these families have now been forced to find medical care out of province.
The only way I could describe it is like living your worst nightmare.
Heather Lazeski relives the moment she watched her 6-month-old baby James go into cardiac arrest during his medical transport from Vancouver to Edmonton.
Over Kamloops, he went into cardiac arrest for 5 minutes. They did chest compressions on him. For those 5 minutes, he stabilized again, and then again on landing in Edmonton, he went into cardiac arrest.
The family, who was originally from Kelowna, was told there was no team available at BC Children's Hospital to help their son when things took a turn for the worse. In Edmonton, baby James was put on a machine that helps breathe oxygen into his heart and lungs.
The transfer was really tough on his little heart.
Due to his multiple cardiac arrests, James suffered damage to his kidneys and liver, which means he's no longer eligible for a heart transplant. While BC Children's Hospital has not confirmed whether an internal conflict between two surgeons is the cause of the staffing problems, this Court of Appeal document reveals there was a dispute between the head surgeon, Dr. Sanjeev Gandhi, and another surgeon, Dr. Andrew Campbell. The Provincial Health Services Authority lost the case and was ordered to reinstate Dr. Campbell. In the meantime, Edmonton's Stollery and Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital have jumped in to help ease the impact. These parents were told just weeks before their scheduled C-section they would have to deliver somewhere else. The first-time family flew to Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital, where they spent 7 weeks.
So our child has a condition called TGA, transposition of the great arteries, and basically it's oxygen issues with the way arteries were growing in his heart, and there needed to be an intervention within a week of birth.
It was a constant stress.
Lisa Kim was told her 5-year-old daughter Evelyn's heart surgery would also be canceled because Dr. Gandhi is now on a leave.
I felt shocked and devastated. Canceled meant all the preparation and all the anxiety of leading up to that just shattered, and now there's just this looming uncertainty.
According to the families, there is no word yet as to when BC Children's Hospital will have a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon available. For families like the Kims, they are left in the dark. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Surrey.
A Toronto woman and her dad are getting a lot of attention when they go for bike rides. We'll show you why after the break.
I started a couple of years ago watching woodworkers online, YouTube, and I developed a few favorites and stumbled onto Rob Cosman's website and immediately was impressed with his woodworking skills with hand tools. And I watched him for the better part of 2 years before I realized that he was pretty much local, 100 miles away. And we talked, and I learned what it was that Rob was doing with the Purple Heart Project, and left here absolutely inspired, sent an email out to, I do all the internal communications for our 100-member Woodworkers Guild, and I sent an email out and said, look, I showed up to see my favorite woodworker, and I left more impressed with his humanity than his woodworking skills, which is saying something because he's simply the best. We're building 7 benches. We're about halfway through right now. They'll be ready for 7 Canadian vets in September, mid-September.
The plan is for at least this year 10, next year 10 benches. I don't see that as the limits of our commitment. It'll be an ongoing thing. If I have anything to say about it, we want to keep doing it.
For me, in my recovery, I'm slowly getting back into you know, being open to hang out with different groups of people and stuff, and that's a slow process for me.
Over my career, I did 5 tours overseas. I did 3 to the Balkans and 2 to Afghanistan. My second tour to Afghanistan, I had a little accident, got a little too close to a suicide bomber. So when my terms came up for a new contract, really physically, I couldn't do it at that point anymore. After I retired, I had some anger issues, and I ended up being diagnosed with PTSD.
Really pretty. This is called Vero. That's the color it gets. It's an emerald green.
It's nice to have the ability to get together with other veterans that are going through the same thing as you are. You know, in the old days, you'd go down to the Legion and you'd have a couple beer and you'd talk with your friends. Well, you don't do that anymore. Those days are gone. The days where soldiers could actually find a bit of respite through comradeship through the Legion, they're not there anymore. And society really hasn't come up with a new plan. So programs like this really, hopefully, will take over.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Support sustainable agriculture and celebrate local food with Gloria Makarenko at Feast of Fields at Home. Learn more about the Gourmet Harvest Festival at farmfolkcityfolk.ca. And from September 2nd to 5th, enjoy free outdoor performances, a virtual art walk, exhibits, and more at the Fort Langley Jazz and Arts Festival. Go to fortlangleyjazzfest.com for more info.
Well, Emma Reed and her dad get a lot of attention when they're out riding their borrowed bike. Emma pedals the trishaw, while Tim, who is battling dementia, soaks in the sights. It's part of the Cycling Without Age program. CBC cameras tagged along with the pair as they went for a ride.
You a little tired today, Dad?
No.
No? Oh, that's good. We've tried to go several times a week. It's so wonderful to at least be able to take him out of the apartment, going through neighborhoods that he knows. With COVID, and folks like my dad with dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases, we've really been limited in terms of the access to all other programs to just keep people stimulated and things like that. And so at least with having access to the bike, it's a great way to have like multiple sensory experiences, right? We hear so many things. We smell so many things in the city, right? We can feel them. Just literally at the doorstep before COVID arrived, we just noticed it was a lot harder on the road bike, right? And do you remember you had a couple tumbles as well? And so then we realized we needed to keep you rolling, but we needed to maybe find a way to scoop you up to do it instead of you pedal power yourself. Step only onto the flat here for the back, right? He definitely attracts attention. We always get thumbs up from people, smiles, people saying, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Gets a few people saying, oh, I've got an uncle or an aunt or my parents who would love to be able to access this. Because there are so many older folks living in community right now, and so the more we can give them, offer them things to do with the time that we've got kicking around, to be spending it in a way that's really stimulating, I think is the goal anyway for us, that's for sure.
That is really nice. Well, thank you for watching CBC Vancouver News at 6 tonight. We are back tomorrow, but if you want more news tonight, The National is on at 10 o'clock, and Dan Burritt is here after that with more local news. Good night.